G'day, I'm Author-NZ. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As promised in my introduction, I'm going to do a video tonight on primer problems and the best tip ever for primer faults with the Lee Pro1000 press. Now, very recently I was given 3 of these presses. As you can see behind me, there's one there that's set up for 45 ACP, this one is set up for 38 357, and this one is set up for 9mm. They do have an inherent problem with the primer feed system, and I'm going to show you something that I've found out that works really well. When I was given these presses, I got on YouTube, as you do, to find out as much as I could about them, how to clean them, how to service them, how to make them work properly. So one of the things that I found was that a lot of people have issues with the primer feed system, and I'm going to show you what I found that works really well for me. Okay, so here's a close-up view of the Lee primer system. The black bit here is the primer feed tube, and this is what gives most of the problems. It's pretty difficult to see inside it, but when they become dirty or they clog up with a bit of powder, things like that, they impede the flow of primers through from the tray here down the tube and into the priming system here. Now what I do is very simple, and I've found this out by trial and error, and I'm going to show you exactly what it is that I've done that makes these primer systems work really well. There's a key tool that I've found that I think makes a difference with these presses, and here it is here. This is part of my beer can collection, which I'll do a video on later, but what you're looking at there is what we call pipe cleaners. Now in New Zealand, that's what we call them. They're a wire base, fluffy thing. They're a bit like a well, they're a bit like a cable tie. They're a bit like a a tie-off thing that's got a fluffy coating on it. Back in the days when our fathers and grandfathers smoked pipes, this is what they cleaned them with. Okay, so this is called a pipe cleaner. Now coming back to the primer tray, this is something that I do before I use the press. Okay, take the primer feed tray off like that, and get your pipe cleaner and feed it down through the tube. You can see it coming down here, and you can give that primer feed tube just a good little clean before you use the press. Okay, now this is what I do every time before I use it. If there's anything in there, if there's any dust or powder flakes or anything that's accumulated in the garage, that'll give it a bit of a clean out, right? Okay, so here's the next use that the pipe cleaner's got. We take the primer tray and take the lid off it, which when they're a little bit tight and sticky can be a bit of a problem. Now I'm only going to put a few in here because one of the problems with the Lee Pro1000 is if the primer tray and the primer feed tube gets a bit low. Okay, so I'm only going to put 20 primers in here. One of them's escaped. Okay, so we'll put 20 Federal. Now I'm using Federals for this, and it is known that Federals aren't the greatest for Lee products, but I've used them. I've had no problems with them. So we give the primer tray a bit of a shake, and we get all these primers the right way up, as they do. One more, come on. Come on. There we go. Okay, and we'll put the lid back on. I hope you can see this in the video. I'll turn my screen around so I can see if we're looking at the right thing. Okay, so I've got some primers in here. Here's another great use for the pipe cleaner. Stick it in the hole and give it a bend, right? So that'll stop them falling out when you load it up. I'll turn the camera around a bit to see if we can see. Okay. So here we go, putting the primer tray into the primer feed tube. Alright, and we get it just about all the way in. And we can then pull the pipe cleaner out, and that stops you losing your primers when you're putting them in. Right, now I'll adjust the camera a little bit so that we can see what's going on here. Right, so as you can see there, the primer feed tube is full of primers. There's hardly anything left in the tray. In fact, there's nothing left in the tray, so we're going to run these pretty light. And one of the tricks with the Lee Pro1000 is don't let the primers get too low. But I'm going to run this right down really low just to show you what I do with the pipe cleaner. On the bench here I've got 10 38 special rounds, okay, so this press is set up for 38 special and 357 Magnum. The one behind it I've got set up for 9mm, and over there that one's set up for 45 ACP. Okay, so I've put some 38 special cases into the case tubes, and what I'm going to show you is when you work the press, hopefully the video will be able to show this, the case goes up, as you know, this is all pretty common stuff, deprime, and then as the case comes around to the next station, the case detector works against the case, and you should be able to see the primers moving down in the tube. Okay, now that worked pretty well. Okay, so as I go down now from here, that primes the case, okay, and that worked perfectly. As I come back up, I go to the next station and flare the mouth, charge the case, come back down, and the next case is coming around. So if I take this case here out, I'll remove that one, and when you bring the press up to the top of its flight, you can move the case plate, and you can see that case primed really well. Okay, but what happens is when the primer tray gets low, the weight of the primers isn't enough to make them move into the priming ram to go back up into the next case, right? So what we do is, if we get one of these pipe cleaners and we just put a little bend in the end of it like that, we can use it as the primers get really low. We can use that just to feed them along a bit, so when you move around and the next case comes in, if you've got a little bit of weight sitting on that primer, it'll flick it down onto the priming arm. Okay, now I'm going to move the camera again, and I'm going to show you another reason that these pipe cleaners are really handy. Okay, now just before we get into this, I'm going to show you two pipe cleaners that I've got that I just keep hanging on the case collator. That one's got quite a big bend in it, and there's another one around the back here that's just got a little bend. That's the one that I use to push the primers down the primer feed tube, but this one here has got another purpose, and I use this one as well. So what I'm going to do is I'll put the camera back on the tripod, and hopefully I'll position it so that you can see what I do. Okay, so every now and then you get a problem where your primer feed hasn't actually worked properly, and you need to make some adjustments, or you want to measure a charge, or you want to adjust a die, and you want to be able to move the ram, and you want to be able to move the shell plate around without actually putting a primer in there. So you really need to empty your primer feed tube. What I've found with this is that if I get this pipe cleaner with a decent bend in it, I can put it on the second to last primer and I can move it. And I use the other one just to hold them there. Then I'll put that one in there behind it, and you can push all those primers back up and into the priming tray. You don't even have to go all the way in, and that'll sit there quite happily like that. Okay, so now there's no primers in the primer feed tube, but there's probably one left in here, which, you know, you can get that out by activating the primer sensor and letting it go in either direction. So I've moved it up a little bit, and now I've got all the primers, and that pipe cleaner will sit there quite happily and hold that primer out of the way. So the rest of them are up in here, and there's one down here. And now I can operate the press, I can adjust the dies, I can take cases out if I want to. You know, I can do anything I like without letting any primers go onto the priming ram, and that I think is the greatest trick for primer feed problems with the Lee Pro1000 press. Okay, so thanks for watching. I'm Author NZ. I hope that you go out and get some pipe cleaners if you've got a Lee Pro1000 press, like I've now got 3 of them. They're really cheap and they're a great solution to the primer feed problems that are inherent with these presses. Now, there's nothing wrong with this press. It's a fantastic piece of machinery. I love mine, my 3. So go and get some pipe cleaners. They'll help you with your primer feed problems. The key is keep it clean, keep the primer feed tube clean, keep the primer tray pretty full. They don't like being empty, and if they are empty, just use a little bend and a pipe cleaner just to push those primers down so that they go onto the priming ram. Alright, thanks for watching. I'm Author NZ. Cheers.